Our next natural set kick is called a horse kick, and I know exactly what you're thinking. That is not what comes to mind, certainly not what comes to mind to me when I think about a horse kicking. It's not a mystery, this posture is based on the movement of a horse's lead leg. Well, broadly speaking, the rough shape anyway. But it's also not a round kick in the conventional sense, or even the conventional way of stacking a round kick. It's a different kind of posture, it's got a different purpose, as we'll see in a moment. But although it's in the same family as a round kick, with a round kick you normally lift the leg up higher, you turn the hip over and kind of hit in more from the side. I'm sure everyone knows that. And usually with a low round kick, you're trying to kick into the opponent's thigh with your shin or with your instep, also very often in sandar. The horse kick is a different concept. It's aiming at a different point, so it's not trying to get into the thigh. It's trying to buckle the leg, so it's trying to hit that point, particularly the knee joint. Can hit a little bit higher or a little bit lower, but to crash into the knee joint and buckle the opponent's structure. And that means you don't really need any flexibility, you need very little leg strength. It fits in completely naturally with your stepping. Just need to lift the leg up a little bit. And it's an incredibly useful, probably the most useful technique in terms of kicks in Yiquan. Certainly much more useful than lead leg side kick, and certainly much more useful than the oblique kick. But needing less power to do also means you've got to be really careful when you're doing it in sparring, because you can really obviously damage someone's knee joint. Okay, so let's take a closer look, and you don't really need that much training on it. It's the principle you need to understand, that it's not the same as a round kick. So what we're going to rely on much more than the flick from the knee and the movement of the hips that you do in the round kick is the structure of the leg itself. And that's why this is a natural set technique. A round kick, as we normally understand it, has much more articulation of the whole limb. So different parts of the leg articulating relative to the others, whereas this one, we're just basically going to use bow, but in the leg. So we're just going to try and lift it as one whole unit, put a little bit of flick on the end, very similar to when we do a lead hand punch. We just lift it and push it in, and very dissimilar to when we do like a higher leg round kick, where we turn the hips and we turn the rear foot over, or around I should say, and we usually put a much bigger fold and then flick on a round kick. We will be using a flick for this kick, just a little bit of a flick, but not as big. Now it's a short, close range movement, so the last thing we want to be doing is dropping our hands, and this is a really good example of what we mean by oppositional force. And pretty much everyone does this when they do a round kick. I know I do it. I've really tried to drill it out. I've got multiple exercises for trying to drill it out, but still I end up doing it. So I want everyone to get this concept of internalization. It's a concept we use in social sciences actually, where we say people get told something so often, you start to internalize it, you start to just act as if it's true even if it isn't. But the way Wang Shangjai understands this is that you start out with big physical movements, and there's still going to be physical movements. You're still going to have shearing forces and use of muscles and tendons and bones, but you get them more and more refined, so more of that movement that actually authors the movement, more of the movement behind the kick and so on, is put back into the body. Exactly the same principle as you could throw a punch by keeping your shoulders straight and extending your arm more, or you could keep the arm straighter and extend your shoulders more, so the overall movement looks smaller because you've put the movement back in the body. I mean, it's the same in principle, but obviously as Wang Shangjai understands it, that can go to very sophisticated degrees. And so, for example, the oppositional force that you get when you throw the other hand back when you do a round kick, which pretty much everyone does, you can get that back in the body, you can put it back in the body, but somehow it just creeps out again. Remember, your intent is a dog. It will always try and maximise power if it possibly can. But at least as our template posture, we try and remove that. We try and just get it back in the body, get it under control, get it tamed, and then, well, when you come to do it, hopefully, with it being such a short movement, you won't just throw back your arm. You'll just kind of control it a little bit at least. But you can see pretty clearly here the torque and the oppositional force and how you've got to just cultivate it to get it into a shorter movement. And if you manage to flick a bit of something off the end of your shoe, then you know you're getting the feeling right. And remember, we have this idea of structural sympathy in each one, so different postures interlink with other postures. So the angle that your leg lifts up on and the way that your hips turn are pretty much identical with the hook. Now there is a bit of complex theory here that I'm not going to go into, but if you think about front, back, left and right as compass points, the closer the hit point is to one of those compass points relative to your body changes the way that the contexts work. And very often they'll reverse, which we've looked at context reversal in previous videos. And that's why, for example, with a hook punch, the A setting and the B setting are both the same open because it's at 90 degrees. And that causes context reversal. I said it was complicated, so that's why I'm not going into it. Some people get really very cross if you get too theoretical with each one. It's only knowledge, it won't hurt you, but it will help you problem solve and it will help you learn on your own anyway. That's not what we're working on at the moment. We're working on at the moment, adding in a little bit more power, a little bit more force. And now another interesting thing starts to happen because we're using that oppositional force that's twisting the whole body at the quar. And so we have to be really strict with the lock point here. It's got to lock at that point where we don't go too far past the centre line, either with the kick or with twisting the upper body in the opposite direction. I mean, in reality, in the chaos, you do that, but this is what we call a template posture, so we try and do it perfectly in training and get it as close as possible to perfect in practice. And as I always say, this is a massive problem within Yiquan. People kidding themselves that they don't have to do sparring. Once you do sparring, you start seeing a lot of problems with your own structure. It's a mould that makes you improve, but you also start seeing why these rules are there, why they're in place. As ever, our next step towards that is to introduce a little bit more lively movement, a little bit more footwork. Now, in terms of the rear leg, generally speaking, I would say, don't do this. And this is knowledge that you get from practical training. If you're going to do rear leg, you might as well just do a round kick because it's quite hard to control it, bringing the leg up as one unit and then moving it round. It's a very awkward movement and it doesn't have much practical value. It's basically like trying to do a round kick as if you've injured your leg or you've got cramp or something like that, and that creates this very awkward movement that can also just like pull you right off balance. And that means at the point when you contact the opponent you can be pushed off balance. So you might as well just do a proper round kick with full power. Still, that doesn't stop me trying to do it, but you can see here it just doesn't work. You may as well just go for it and put the kick in properly. Having said that, one thing you can do is just try making the movement smaller, getting a smaller back leg round kick and getting it neater, getting it more internalised and changing our thinking about what we mean by that concept of internal. And if you really are interested in trying to contain that, trying to control that movement of the arm back, one of the drills that I do is just putting my hands on my head and practicing kicks. Works to some degree, just to help train the body not to do that a little bit. In terms of setting the posture, this is going to be what we call a soft set because it's just in the nature of the posture. There'll be a little bit, you can see there a little bit of rear heel lifts up and then down on the floor, but it's not going to be a hard set in the way that we hard set a big round kick. So I want you to listen to these examples of proper round kicks and listen to the hard set. So if you look and listen carefully, you can see that those aren't just the sounds of footsteps. Those are the sounds of the sets in between the footsteps, and they're just as loud as the footsteps themselves. Those are the thuds that you can hear between the footsteps. But with the horse kick, those thuds are not present. Okay, so next we practice moving forwards with a push step. And from this angle you can see that the push step is very difficult to see with a kick, and that's why it's so useful. And remember, there are lots of different ways of doing the push kick. You can compound it more, or you can do it with a really obvious first step and then an obvious second step. And remember, we think about that in terms of beats. So even though there's two movements here, we try and get it as close to one beat as possible. So it's like one, like that, just, or two half beats, one, like that. And that gets more body momentum in it, more body weight. But we can also do it like 1, 2. So look here, look at the timing, 1, 2. And this is all about how the momentum gets fed into the final hit point. It all changes how much energy gets pushed forwards. And then moving backwards, we use what we call a retreating leading step. So the rear leg is leading, but it's moving us backwards. And we take this just like a little half step. And remember this idea that all of these measurements are just based on the natural size of the body, of your body. The difference with the retreating step is it makes your kick a little bit wider, which is something to be aware of because those minor changes can make big differences. And the rhythm for this is just 1, 2, but it's a little bit of a slower 1, 2. The tempo is slightly slower, 1, 2. And you can do it in lots of different other ways, of course, but there's lots of reasons for doing it at a slightly slower tempo. The most important one is it's really difficult to get a kick in when you're retreating, which we'll look at another time.